Where I want to start is with my video practice itself. So I have an experimental video practice that sort of began alongside of a documentary film practice. I by and large left my documentary film practice back in the 90s. I finished a few feature films, and while I was doing those feature films, they were arduous personal affairs with one was on my father. It was called Bastard, and he's a great guy, don't get me wrong. It was about his relationship with his mother, and so it was just, you know, an intense kind of arduous affair, and you know, you were spending so much time that I needed a more immediate engagement with the creative expression, and so I began in the mid-90s doing live video, VJing, short experimental works. And those works garnished a lot more feedback, a lot more immediacy than any of the documentary work that I did, which they were still deep engagements, but it was so much easier, or at least fun for me to go out and produce the kind of work that I was producing then. So, you know, I did raves in the 90s, which probably ages me as much as the gray hairs in my beard. But you know, and in the 90s, of course, we were, my friend and I, we were VJs. We had a few regular nights at some clubs, and we did raves, and like we literally had a station wagon full of VHS tapes that we would drag out to events, and we would be rifling through VHS tapes and making sample loops and engaging with the technology in a pretty deep and also heavy way. And so, but one of the key things that always really excited us about the engagement was the way that analog video was kind of alive. The way that a signal was electricity, essentially, and that your engagement with things like feedback, which everybody has probably turned a camera onto a television and created a feedback loop, that your engagement with this was like touching electricity, was like handling it and manipulating it, and using tools to kind of get inside of that was something that we were really excited about. And we were also obviously huge music fans, and so the idea of creating a kind of musical framework for the creation of video, engaging with the tools of creation in video like they were instruments, and started to kind of try and develop a whole framework around how to make that, how to perform as if you were a musical performer. So what's playing here is a video called Monster. This is probably one of the last major works that I undertook in an immediate sense in this framework, and this was a large collaboration between some collaborators that I'll talk about as I go through the presentation. We basically, it was a live, I think it was rarely done, we created HD feedback. So using, it took about 8 hours to figure out how we could plug the signals together and make it happen. The music is also improvisational, so there was about 8 of us in the studio, I think, producing this work. And 3 or 4 computers connected with video going in and out and actually feeding back into each other. Everything that you're looking at it's a single take. It's not a process video in the sense of arduously sitting down and working on stuff. It's not coded either. It's really looking at analog tools and processing things through analog tools and creating a one single shot deal. It's also voice activated to some degree. That's a friend of mine, Ross Birdwise, who was really into creating sort of really, this is why it's called Monster, and really odd works with his voice. And he's really into it's kind of a free jazz, and I'm hoping that in the end this presentation won't be like sort of free jazz where it's really fun to play and not very fun to listen to. Through that, I was really focused on the fusion of sound and vision into the same experience. How to create this kind of this kinetic expression that was a singular thing. And so a number of the short videos that played beforehand were all about those sort of short experiments outside of a live context.
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm going to show you what Mr. Wonderful can do.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a special lumberjack match. Lumberjacks will surround the ring. If either man leaves the ring on their own or by force, they will be thrown back in.
They're at it!
Suplex. 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 Suplex.
Here comes the one, the only, the Superfly. Wow.
The wrestler video that I played, which was kind of it's half a joke, it represents the other side of that work, that's actually a battle video. And so there's these video battles in Toronto called Videodrome, where VJs and video artists come together, and it's like a DJ battle, and you present your works and the audience chooses who goes on. But there's a very strict sort of dogmatic structure in which you create the video, and that is that you can't separate the audio from the video. It's all created through samples, but everything you see you have to hear, everything you hear you have to see. You can't go grab a sample here and there. And so you're trying to basically make music out of the flotsam and jetsam of popular culture and bring it together in one place. And so so with that's like the sort of the antithesis of, at least structurally, the kind of video that I've created in a live improvisational, which is very precise and very, very much about video software being able to allow you to do very, very precise cuts and using it to compose music with. I'm a horrible musician, so my video is not really musical, but some people are amazing. And so when Nuit Blanche has in Toronto an open call, they have different stages. They have a curator for different regions of the city, and then they have an open call. And we were sort of sitting around one day as a number of friends and I talking about projects that we could propose, that we could pitch to this. And along this idea, we were like, well, what if you could VJ the CN Tower? Wouldn't that be amazing? And so we put together a proposal that essentially requested to do just that. To create this kind of to create a sort of a light composition that was conceived of with a soundtrack, and a soundtrack that could be broadcast over the whole city. So we'll take a video break. I'm going to play you this documentation. Essentially what you're looking at is maybe 5 minutes of the 5 minutes of the last part of collaboration with If Then Do. So the night was broken up into 2 parts. It looped for the whole night. It was a 90-minute project, and so there was a 60-minute loop that I created with Jokers of the Scene, who are DJs who've gone on to work in Toronto and make great music. They did an hour-long sort of DJ mix, and then If Then Do, which is a local electroacoustic group, we worked together to create a 25-minute original score for the CN Tower. What you'll see here is the documentation of the tower, obvious, and the Sky Dome. And across the bottom is what's happening on the lights of the CN Tower. So I was one of the first artists to get access to this lighting infrastructure at the CN Tower. And what we did was, because we would have like almost just a day, I spent an overnight, 2 overnights in a hotel room with the operations manager of the CN Tower, and that's all I had to program this hour-and-a-half long project. And they wouldn't give me the lighting map to the CN Tower to go home and work on. I don't understand why, but you know, they wouldn't let me do it. So we had to create this different approach to the way to use the system. So we used a very simple animation technique, which was what you're looking at in the tower is basically a slice. And I could run a JPEG through it, and it would seem like it was animation. So I created these JPEGs that were essentially sort of graphical expressions of the music that we had created, and ran them through the slit in the tower at a set pace. So we timed it perfectly with the music. And what that allowed us to do was to create way more complex lighting scenarios inside the lighting system of the tower than would have been possible with programming. It would have taken, the operations manager was like, this would have taken a year to program in another way. So we mixed some of the simple programming that you can do with the color kinetic system alongside this system. So I'll talk a little bit about Nuit Blanche quickly, because you should all go to Nuit Blanche this weekend. And in relation to this project and how it worked, and one of the foundations of the project, I mean, Nuit Blanche was key. I never would have been able to access the CN Tower. I mean, I'm a cool guy and everything, but it's really not that accessible. They're very concerned about what is essentially a national icon, and they don't just let anybody in any context do it. And so what Nuit Blanche created in Toronto was this feeling that artists and creatives should be able to access infrastructure in a way to reconsider it and to open it up into a different way. So, you know, there was sort of three the sort of foundational components. The Nuit Blanche was one, but also the fact that it was existing infrastructure. So those, I think, are one of the, you know, great Nuit Blanche projects. Take existing infrastructure and turn them on their head. They allow an audience to come and experience something in a different way. But what's interesting about that is it's not only what the artists do to come and experience the object. So I know Megan was telling me about one, I think their biggest coups is to have a light switch installed on a lamppost, which is like, and I've tried to work with the lighting people in the city, and it's not easy, and that's an amazing coup. But people are also open to seeing their city in a different way. Nuit Blanche creates this context in which everyone is wandering around thinking, is that part of the art? And you saw where, like, on the 3 times I've been to Nuit Blanche in Toronto, which is just, I think, an unparalleled contemporary art event in North America. There was over 1 million people wandering the streets of Toronto seeking out contemporary art. That just doesn't happen very often, if ever. It's hard to get like 150 people at an opening sometimes, and people were they were in their guidebooks, ready to engage with the city in a new way. And by like 4 o'clock in the morning, you would see people wandering around in alleyways, looking at stuff, wondering if that was part of the art. It's like, is that an installation? And I don't, oh my God. And they're totally ready and open to see their city in a different way. And so I think, you know, that's sort of this key point of how art can engage in the city. And Nuit Blanche is one of those things. And I will talk a little bit about the work that we do at Art Engine, and that kind of loops back into the same idea of the way artists engage in the city and way it can change the whole city. But one of the other parts I wanted to talk about was radio. A key component of this project, impossible without it, was radio. Radio is still an extremely ubiquitous technology, and it's far more reliable than anything else that there is out there in terms of being a totally synchronistic experience in the city. So there was no way for us to employ any other technology that millions of people could tune in and experience something simultaneously, and that was awesome. And so I think that one of the things that will be interesting to look back on Nuit Blanche after it happens is, I think, you know, obviously at Art Engine we're excited and engaged with a lot of technological work, but those might not be the most fantastic and awesome works of Nuit Blanche. What you might find is the ones that engage with different technologies and totally ubiquitous things in a new way, and not necessarily challenging and pushing new technologies, but just experiencing old things in a new way. So I think, you know, that's one of the big strengths, and that's, I guess, my challenge to you to go out in Nuit Blanche and figure out what's more interesting in terms of that context, in terms of how people see their city. So I started working at Art Engine in 2005, and essentially, you know, Art Engine is a creative technology center. We provide equipment, we provide resources. We now have a pretty great group of people who thoroughly engage with the ideas of technology. And let's look for, oh, there we are. These are beautiful. Let's try these. Do-do-do. Maybe PowerPoint is better, I don't know. Okay, here's one. there's an idea. When I first came to Art Engine, we basically, you know, we had we had resources, but our public was very small. And what we wanted to do is figure out a way to engage the public in projects on their own terms. And that's where I think some of the roots of my engagement with art in the city came from. And what we wanted to do was to not just tackle popular subjects. So the first big show that we did was called Superfan. And what we did was we basically brought people, we brought artists into the sports bars and created commissioned work for sports bar environment. And we had 5 works installed all over Elgin Street. And we had an opening in one of the Hoolies, I think it was. We had gold sprints, which are the stationary bike races, as part of the opening, competitions between artists. And you know, at the time we were just on the cusp. There was a number of big shows around the world that were about sport and art. The National Gallery bought the huge long piece on Zidane. But one of the key things about it was that we didn't want to just bring the, you know, let's think about popular subjects, but actually go into a popular environment and engage that with a popular audience. So not just sort of retreat from the ideas, but go and directly and to engage them. And so this was one of my favorite projects that we've done. I still think about it. I think it was 2007 maybe, if we're lucky. And the next thing that we moved on from there was this lovely Volvo. With the Volvo, we had the impetus for a project called Night Ride. And what we did was we wanted to create essentially sort of portable sound installations for personal car stereos. So we commissioned 2 artists. I was driving back home with my partner across northwestern Ontario, and I came over the crest of this hill, and I was listening to Tim Hecker, and there was like a weird town off in the distance, an orange light, and it was just awesome. It was just incredible. And I thought, what if we could commission artists to make specific soundtracks for specific driving experiences? So we got the funds, and we commissioned 2 artists, Tim Hecker, which was kind of a dream for me, and another artist, completely different engagement, Marla Halati, we started, there's a 3-phase project. If you'd like, you can take the Night Ride yourself. You can download the map. You can go to Art Engine and find the map, find the MP3s, and go on the drive yourself. You run through the Gatineau Hills at nighttime with an ominous soundtrack by Tim Hecker. Or you can take Marla's Ride, which is a meandering, creepy ride where you pick someone in front of you and you follow them until they're done. And if they finish before the end of the song or the track, then you pick someone else and follow them. Marla had to do some reimagining of her project because we launched it with a 5.1 surround sound stereo system installed into a 5.1 surround sound system installed into a bus, and we took that bus load of people on the drives themselves. What Marla did was actually created 8 sound objects that people passed around the bus that would change the composition as they passed the boxes around the bus. So it became a kind of people-powered sound system. This permanent layer that we've added to the city is kind of an invisible layer. We tell people about it all the time. People can go and engage with it. But we needed to also do something else, and we needed to figure out a way to create a kind of a festival. And so we saw a gallery and saw Video had started this festival, Electric Fields, which is a bit about electronic art, but it kind of hadn't, they weren't sort of taking it and running with it, and we really wanted to do that. And so we began taking care of Electric Fields, and we've done, we're in our 4th edition this year. So October 10th to 14th, we have a festival called Electric Fields, which is basically a festival about playing with technology. Ideas around technology, a different kind of engagement, a performative engagement. So we have performances with audiovisual things. We have a big thing in St. Bridget's where there will be a huge screen, big sound, like a rock show without a rock star. It's quite an ominous and awesome experience. We've done a number of shows there, and then we have a symposium on sound and architecture, so you can come and talk about ideas around the relationship between sound and space. Not only the buildings around us, but the cultural spaces, all of that. It's true, the time is running out. I guess then the last thing I'll talk about before question and answer is Electric Fields 2013. So this, I really encourage you to come to Electric Fields 2012, of course. Don't wait till 2013 to come. But 2013, we tried some different stuff in 2011 around engaging with specific spaces and going out in commissioning works for those specific spaces. And one of the things that we felt about the festival is that we didn't just want to emulate a festival in Montreal, which is basically what we've been building, is a festival that's very similar to a festival like Mutech or Electra or Acousma, all these really amazing festivals with really amazing audiences ready to experience something completely different. So what we thought we wanted to do is figure out, what does a festival look like here in this city? What does an electronic art festival look like when it's growing up and grown from the ground up? And so what we're doing for 2013 is this idea around us making the city, us being the city. And the programs for the festival will start probably in the summer. They will engage with large, different types of community groups. So for instance, we're working on a project that might involve sonic portraits created by youth in different neighborhoods in the city and broadcast those over community radio for people to get a different sense of what the sort of youthful experiences of a specific place in the city. It might also involve a few projects that we will actually bring from overseas, but instead of bringing the artists, we're going to tell the artists to stay home. We want their project, but the project's going to be built by people on the ground here. So the idea that the ideas of the projects should be totally global, but that the people are local, and that in order to build interesting ideas and to build something specific here, we need to work with the people on the ground here. So we have no idea what this festival will actually look like. We know that it probably won't look like this year, but what we want to do is start working with people now to build an idea of how technology can be more socially engaged with the community, and how the creativity can stay at the forefront and the technology sort of step behind. And that the social engagement that can cut across those types of technologies that are now fairly ubiquitous. I mean, in some ways, what we do at our festival, you might see it at Blues Fest. You might see at other festivals. So we need to figure out what's different and what's unique about what we're doing. How did I get pulled into this? Good question. I don't know. No, I know. It's a long time ago. I was in school, I was doing communications, and basically I had changed programs like 3 times, 3 different universities, as I said, short attention span. But it was always a trouble to find something that had the right mix with action, right mix with creation and criticality. I was almost finished my communications degree, and I just thought, studying extremely critical ideas, I mean, from structural ideas to McLuhan but there was nothing in the school that actually enabled you to engage with those ideas. You were just so far removed, and how could you be in a media-saturated world and not want to engage? So I left school, started to make documentaries. I found Saw Video, which I was in a program for 6 months called the Youth and New Media Program, which was basically, life-changing. It gave me 6 months access to equipment, to activities, almost free range. It was like a job creation program that basically ruined me for regular employment. But I got involved and engaged with all kinds of artists. I had my first experience with analog equipment of a time-based corrector, if anybody knows what that is, and it just totally blew my mind, because there was so much thinking and engagement with it, but it was also about doing and making and creating. He's asking about a blog series that we started at Art Engine called "We Are Not a Creative City," which was a sort of long-term conversation, a 2-month conversation between myself and Kwendi Kifense, who is a cultural planner at the City of Ottawa, but also a DJ, event thrower, urban theorist, person, like a great person to have this conversation with. And so the impetus for it started with the idea, is certainly a bit of a jab at Richard Florida and the idea that have taken fire over the world about the creative city and the creative economy. You know, some of it was about a resistance to the idea, the monetization of culture. You know, that the strongest parts of culture are not what it contributes to the economy as an economic driver. I think the most strongest and valid parts of the cultural sector are how it, you know, contributes to a democratic society, how it makes people better citizens and richer lives, and not just on the inherent value of the art itself. I don't think that argument is the one that you can hold on to now in 2012, but that if we think that, and how do we then go out and engage with the people outside of the sort of the cultural sector and make cultural work relevant to the population? A challenge. It was a bit of a challenge to people within my own cultural community to think about how do you extend yourself beyond that community and create engagement. But it was a conversation between Kwendi and I, so he had a very different opinion than I did, because he actually used to blog for Richard Florida and stuff like that. So if you want, you can go onto artengine.ca. You'll find the 4 or 5 part conversation. But the idea that we are not a creative city was not that we don't have creativity in the city, but to think about what the real character of the city is. You know, the coming out with Richard Florida's that we're the top creative city in the world is ridiculous. Anybody who thinks that we have more of a dominant creativity than Montreal or Toronto is just, it's, why do we want to go on that road? But what is this city? What is interesting about the city? What's its character? We had this conversation yesterday in the office that maybe if the bureaucracy of the city actually creates a stable economic base for our city where we won't really have the same kind of recession, and it's not going anywhere. We don't have a creative economy where the government's going to move. So we could actually be more experimental and more liberated, but we have to think about what the real character of the city. She's asking me about how to translate some of this work to the ubiquitous sort of screens of today, which are handheld and smaller and all over. I mean, I think I went back to school to study architecture. That was my answer. I kind of really actually started making, you know, light work, work that was about sort of breaking off of the screen. And the CN Tower was certainly a huge, literally huge step for me outside of that formal screen. And so I think I've had a departure away from the idea of a formal screen and into the more experiential, and thinking about how we bring compositional ideas into light and structural elements. So I think I've gone back to school to architecture actually to engage with materials and to think about space and time, how we experience space over time, not just as an aesthetic object in a single point, but rather how it experiences over time in life and how it experiences over time in everyday life. And so instead of engaging with the small screen, I've actually kind of, I think, left the screen. The Coda Nova box is, it was one of the first MIDI controllers built for VJs in mind. So it's for those of you probably budding musicians, but MIDI is like an age-old control language for, it's largely used for musical instruments, but of course it's been used for all kinds of devices over the sort of explosion of electronic devices. So what this does, it basically allows me to control a piece of software on here. It externalizes the process. So before this, I was using like a MIDI keyboard, which people always thought I was playing the music wherever I was. And this actually just has the idea of visual creation in mind. And it really, like, it changes a physical surface, and knobs and buttons and things to push really change the way you create work. It's just it's not precise and meddling. It's much more gestural. Plus, I pound on things when I'm in clubs and spill beer on it and stuff like that. I'm not really in clubs anymore. It's not hard to teach actually, because it's so much. I mean, with certain types of software that you can do. I mean, I think the hardest part to teach anybody is the actual sort of creative side. The technical side is I mean, you can do it. It's not hard. And it's very immediate. So that's one of the things too. And it's much more forgiving, right, than sound. Like if I was pretending to play music up here today and I was like playing notes and then I left that note up there for like 5 minutes while I talk about something, it'd be really deafeningly annoying. But you just kind of forget about it. So it's so much more forgiving that it makes it very easy to get people involved and working with it. I did this, one of the most favorite things I did was, sorry, I'm talking about the easier part, but whatever. The favorite thing I did was a workshop with the Ottawa Art Gallery and Howie Tsui, who is an artist really influenced by manga and anime and character driven. And he did a workshop with the kids on creating their own characters. And then we scanned those and colored them, and then we brought them into Modulate and we created a mix with them. And they VJ'd their own drawn characters and stuff like that, and then we made a VJ mix and they took it home and played it for their parents. And that was like, I think 2004 or 5 or something, and that was still one of the most fun things I've ever done. So it's the hard part is the refinement and the point where you are able to improvise and get an actual performance that can stand on its own. That's a big transition.